Okay, everyone, you'll be glad to know, probably getting hungry. This is the shortest talk of the day. It's just to outline how methane is being collected and what the strategy is from an Irish perspective as to how we can actually ramp it up now and see if we can get some genetic indexes on it. So if we look at the background to it, and we refer back to Jonathan's talk, at the very first talk there, and he showed all the sources of greenhouse gas emissions on the dairy herd, and you can see that there is numerous different sources of it. But the recent modelling that Jonathan and Lawrence have done that kind of indicates that about 57% of the total emissions is coming from enteric methane. It's the methane excreted by the animal, either burped out the mouth or excreted out the back passage. So the big questions there is does that vary by animal? Is it a trait that's herdable? Does it have a genetic component to it that we can actually breed from it? And can we measure it in sufficient volumes so that we can actually get these equivalent PTAs that we see for milk, fat, protein, and now with the likes of TB coming on? So they're the big questions from a scientific point of view as how we can actually move this forward. If we look at the methods that have been out there, and the methane collection has been going on for probably a couple of decades at this stage. The initial one was what was called a respiration chamber, where an animal actually got put into a big glass chamber and it monitored all the emissions of gases that were being excreted. And it's the gold standard in that it can measure all those emissions. But there's a downside to that, in that it's very cost prohibitive. There's a lot of labour involved with it. You can measure one animal at a time. There's very low throughput on the back of that. And there's also animal welfare issues in the sense that the animal has been removed from the herd. So there are a lot of question marks about how that can be sustained. The second method then that is gaining a lot of popularity now are these infra-breath analyzers. They're called sniffers. Okay, you can see there it's quite a small box that actually can measure that, and they're becoming quite popular as a solution for countries that would have a lot of milking robots, and that you can fit them as a hood at the front of the robot. And basically, the Dutch breeding company CRV have invested heavily in this area, and they've installed 100 of these on 100 Dutch farms, with the aim to collect about 10,000 cows with methane data over the next 3 years. And they're looking at EBVs in 3 to 4 years' time. Okay, and I suppose from that perspective, they're a relatively cheap piece of kit, and that the initial pricing they're around 5,000 or something less than 5,000 per unit. And I suppose they are cow friendly in that the cow comes into the robot, she doesn't see anything different, that she's getting her meal in the robot and is collecting the methane data at the same time. There are some downsides to it. It's an approximation. You're only collecting the ruminal methane. Now that is 95% of the methane. It's methane that comes out the mouth. But we know that robots are not predominant here in Ireland, so it's not an immediately practical solution here right now. The third source then are what they call the green feeds, and if you were coming in outside, you might have been wondering what the piece of kit out there was. That's the what's called the green feed system. Okay, so if we look at the pros to that type of system, it is a more practical device. Somewhat location flexible. The device out there is actually mounted on a trailer for pasture-based methane recording, but it can also be taken off and put into a shed for winter-based recording. It does offer the opportunity to record it on the cows and also growing animals, and they are growing in popularity worldwide. They are produced by the company Sealock in South Dakota in the States, and they have a backlog in terms of the demand for these machines. They're being exported all the way around the world. And I suppose it is cow friendly also, in the sense that the cow isn't actually being forced through the machine. Again, just collects the ruminal CH4. It does need a technician, because there's a lot of moving parts to it, updating the gas canisters, recalibrating, etc. And unfortunately, it's too expensive from an individual farmer's perspective that That machine out there is probably retailing at the moment about €70,000 just for that kit. So, moving on then, look, what do we have here in Ireland? What are we currently looking at? If we look at the locations there, we can see in Moore Park down the road, there are 4 of those machines installed. They've currently pushed about 280 dairy cows through them over a couple of years, where they've measured the full lactation. So there's a lot of good data coming through that's going to help to understand what's going on there. From the Tully perspective, it's a commercial beef feeding system. So there's about 1,360 cattle have gone through that system now at this stage, where they're measuring the feed intake, they're measuring the live waste, but they're also measuring the methane. So, as I say, that data is gathering. And what we can say about that is that by looking at the data, we're quite confident that a 3-week period of intensive measurement on those animals might be enough to give us enough to get a snap picture of a group of animals and how they rank, and so that data, if you were to repeat it 3 weeks later, that you'd actually get the same level of ranking in the herd. So that's the Tully performance test station. There's also some of these machines. There's 4 actually in UCD. Monitoring both dairy and beef cattle, and also in Grange, obviously, which is the beef centre, recording it on suckler cows and also finishing animals there too. You can just see a picture of the machine at Grass, but also the one at Tully. The one at Tully does need a barrier up to make sure that the animal isn't getting bullied as it's stuck in the machine, but also that you know for certain that that's the animal that's gone through the machine. And obviously there's been a couple of projects there that have helped to fund what's there currently, such as the Green Breed project, the Master project, and obviously the Department of Agriculture have heavily invested in those machines to help get a handle on the methane emissions from an inventory point of view. So I suppose, look, the reasons for investment, they are numerous, but you can look at things like feed additives. What's the impact of different feed additives? Does that wane over time as the animal actually adapts to the additive? Looking at the diet, numerous studies, both in Tully maybe and also in UCD, looking at the effect of a total mixed ration diet, but also a high concentrate diet, which the bulls up there are being finished on, and comparing that then to the Moore Park herd, where you have the grass-based system. And what we've tried to do in recent intakes is actually take some of the progeny from the Moore Park herd and actually push them through the Tully system, so that you can actually get the grass-based measures on the cows, but also the TMR type diet on the progeny. And that will be a key piece of research to try and see is how well can you predict the grass-based measure on the cows from the young growing progeny that are going to a slightly different purpose. I suppose the main one then from an ICBF perspective is to try and develop genetic evaluations using that data. And if you think of it, it's an onerous task, given how expensive machines are and how practical it is to get them onto farm. And you're trying to capture that whole life cycle emission of greenhouse gases. So you can see there's a need to get from birth up to early in life, when the decision is made, and the cow goes on, that's the female, goes on for milk production, or if it's a terminal-based animal that's going on for meat production. I suppose, look, there's a number of questions there we have to try and answer. Is what's the trait definition? Is it a gross methane trait that we fit into the index, or is it a methane trait corrected for things like feed intake and carcass? Do we need a single EBV, such as what we have in age of slaughter now, or is it an EBV that will be growing or lactating animal, or is it an EBV that needs to be separate, depending on whether it's a TMR type diet or a grass based? They're all the questions. Key then will be the relationship with the other traits. Early indications are that feed intake drives a lot of the methane output, but that is not a very, very, very strong relationship. The Tully data is indicating that 70% of the methane output can be explained by feed intake. And I suppose then, look, how does that feed into the breeding programme? But the good news is that based on the 1,300 animals that have gone through Tully, is that the trait is herdable. It's in the region of 20 to 30%. So if you can replicate that on the cow side, it'll pitch it at a really nice level much higher than traditional fertility traits and just slightly lower than the milk production traits, which means you don't need as many animals then, given that the herdability is higher. And again, obviously, the work on both of those, the feed/diet type and also the animal type, it'll be used then to update the national inventory, okay, both at a system level, such as what can we say is the average emission level, let's say, for bulls on a high concentrate finishing diet versus cows in early lactation on a grass-based diet. That data will then feed into national inventory. But then accounting for genetic merit, as we've seen there's initial results coming out of Moorpark that are indicating that the high EBI cows are at the same level of emissions, but also you're getting the benefit then of the higher milk output. So again, that will be reflected on the beef side as well. If we can demonstrate with the animals going through tully that the commercial beef value of those animals has an influence on driving down the methane per kilo of carcass, then that will eventually feed into the inventory. So look, just to summarise, the active CH4 is being recorded at research level at the moment. It's trying to capture all the dynamics around that methane and the relationship with all the other traits. It's not at sufficient volumes for genetic evaluation. Certainly not on the dairy cow side. It'll probably come on the growing animal / finishing animal first, because the data tully is probably maybe a little bit ahead than where we are with the dairy cow. I suppose the key thing then is that the industry aligns then to collapse all that data and make it available for genetic evaluation. So there are a number of new initiatives coming on there. The Meat Technology Ireland are invested in 5 of these machines, but there's also a new funding call between New Zealand and Ireland that is going to fund 2 more of these machines that'll be active out there on dairy herds. I suppose, look, there is a need here maybe to engage with the power manufacturers, the non-robot manufacturers, to see if we can get a lower cost alternative that maybe that sniffer technology that's been rolled out in the Netherlands might be an option if they can actually fit it to other parlours. To really make the impact from a genetic evaluation perspective, we do start to need to get these herds out, these machines out into Gene Ireland herds, where the young sires that are going to influence the breeding programme are getting tested on, so that you can get reliable proofs as we move forward. I suppose the goal within 3 to 5 years is that we'll have a direct methane trait feeding into the EBI and allowing you to see that there's actual differences there that have been driven by the different genetic lines that are out there.